All right, South Africa, if you're one of those people that have visions of seeing dead people, you are absolutely going to love Invisible Strings. It's a novel by Naledi Mashishi. She joins us on the show this morning in the book club. Naledi, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Really good. Really excited to meet you and talk about this beautiful novel that you've penned.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Tato, Kemang Wetang, how does it happen that she can see dead people?
So Tato is this young girl who's born, and she's kind of born as a result of an unplanned pregnancy. Her mom, Mamokgeti, is not super keen to have her.
Okay.
And has to drop out of bits to have her, but ends up having her. And then when she turns around 2, she begins to develop powers. So the first power she has is the ability to find missing objects. And then she begins to have visions of the future. And the third, she sees dead people. She sees ghosts specifically.
Yo.
And finally, she's able to heal by touch. And what happens is that a pastor who's coming past her and her mom sees Tato healing a cat and decides to make her mom a deal to pass off Tato's healing powers as his own in exchange for money.
Congratulations on your first novel.
Thank you.
Love just the premise of what this book is about. Because I've got you here, I'd like you to tell me where the idea for this came from. We'll talk about is it fiction or non-fiction at a later when we get in deeper in our conversation.
So I was inspired by magical realism after I read this book called The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende.
Okay.
And so I decided to try and practice writing like magical fiction short stories. And this is one of the ideas that popped up. This idea of a little girl who has healing powers and whose powers get co-opted by a pastor who wants to use them for his own profit. And then I thought that the story would not work as a short story because it required a little too much.
Okay.
So I decided to rather turn it into a novel, and that's how I got to this book.
And turning it into a novel meant what? Where did you go to now make it into more than just a short story?
I kind of like plotted out the plot line in my head, but I didn't start writing it until 2019 when I got writing residency at Blackbird Books called the Casa Lord Writing Residency.
Well done.
So that was, thank you. So that was in Pretoria for about 3 weeks. So I went to Pretoria and I wrote out the first couple of chapters over that 3-week period, and then I went home and finished it. So it was both a process of like planning it out, like actually writing down a plan, but also just kind of going where the story took me.
And tell me more about the story itself. I mean, it also touches on African spirituality. What's that about?
So I was inspired by African spirituality because I've heard a lot about callings and they kind of run in my family. So
Okay.
I remember just having a thought experiment where I was thinking to myself, most people who get called to be sangomas, but what happens if
Right.
you get called for a specific purpose, just to fix one thing, and then
Yeah.
you're done. And then once you've done that, you're done. And so I spoke to a number of people who have gifts. Some said that there are some callings that work that way. Others said that their callings don't really work like that. But
Who of those people had the most chilling account of the experience that you spoke to?
pretty much every calling story I've heard sounds scary. I mean, I have friends who started getting sick. So I got interested in just exploring that.
Okay.
But also, just imagining a scenario in which this person is being called. And I didn't really want to call it a calling because I was doing my own thing. So in the book,
Right.
I allude to it possibly being a calling, but I kind of want to leave it open-ended because I do really do my own thing in it. But it was an experiment that kind of started from there.
Okay. So a large part of the book, or portions of it at least, are inspired by actual events or accounts from people's experiences.
So there are portions of the book that are inspired by actual things, because I also wanted to bring in like a whole historical element. So I also wanted to speak a bit about the families who lost someone during a birth date and never found out what happens to that person, and
Of course.
and what does it feel like to still live with that guilt. So I brought in that, but like a lot of it was me just touching on themes. So like that kind of theme, these pastors who kind of exploits their congregation was another theme that I wanted to touch on. But in terms of like the actual events, most of it is completely made up. It's not very autobiographical in that
Okay.
sense, yeah.
Okay, I like that. Have you had a calling yourself?
No, I have not. I mean, well, there's some people who say, I would say, describe something to them and they'd say, oh, that sounds like a calling. So I don't know if they were just saying that, but I don't think that I've had a calling before.
Talk to me about writing fantasy fiction and what fascinated you about the genre itself.
So I've always been into fantasy. Like I read Harry Potter when I was small and also the Percy Jackson series. So I've always been into more speculative fiction. I remember when I was growing up, I was a bit sad that there wasn't really that in South African fiction. Most of the fiction that I was seeing growing up that was South African was like either about dates or along those lines. But that has started to change. I mean, even before I published this book, there was like Lauren Bucas,
right.
So that has started to change. It was me wanting to write fantasy, but also make it very South African. Invisible
Strings, was that an intentional title or did it just come by default?
It's a title that came very far into I can't even say the editing process. When we were almost about to publish the book and we were doing the cover art and my publisher was like, you need a title now. That's when this title came. But I didn't write with this title in mind, but I think that it
works.
It works. It works both in terms of the actual powers that are described in the book and in terms of a number of the themes that I explore in it.
Okay. Who are you hoping reads this book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that originally I'd had a reader in mind that kind of looked like me. So like a relatively young black woman who grew up and also liking fantasy. But I've actually found that in terms of the feedback that I've gotten from the book, I've had a lot of positive feedback from people of like a variety of different ages. Like I've had older women who've really loved the book. I've had people around my age who've really loved it. So it's been interesting. It hasn't only resonated with one audience. I can say that.
Okay, and who are you reading?
Right now, I am reading Nnedi Okorafor, Who Fears Death, which is a really cool like fantasy meets sci-fi African book. So she's really cool. Yeah, that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Awesome stuff. Listen, thank you so much for coming on to the Morning Show Book Club. Officially, we congratulate you on this book and go out and get it and read. Any last words from you, Naledi?
No, just thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, please buy my book.
Awesome stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Naledi Mashishi, everybody.